I was not particularly interested in the Japanese American concentration camps until a few years ago when I saw the exhibit in Chicago, Then They Came for Me. It featured the photography of Ansel Adams and Dorothea Lange, huge, life-size pictures of people who look like me, standing in line with their suitcases and boxes tied with string, images of their white neighbors, coldly watching as they were removed from their homes, being loaded onto trains, sent to camps in the middle of nowhere. As I stood surrounded by these giant pictures, it finally hit me how my family, some of them who had been in California since the late 1800s, were not given their basic rights of American citizens, which they were. That exhibit changed me. So what I'm going to tell you about today is me trying to figure this all out, to mine my past. And you know, mine workers, it's hard work dragging out the truth, separating it from the muck and the grit that obscures where it's all hidden. My story begins in 1942, before I was born. My mom, Liliota, is 33. I call her Lilio. She and her mom, my grandma, is 60. We're getting on a train in California at Fresno's Assembly Center because the U.S. government had ordered all Japanese Americans to travel to destinations unknown. Deported to the sticks, even if you're sick, or you have a little baby, or a son in the middle of college. You have to go, get out, go! Get moving. Where are you taking us? You'll find out when you get there. Get on the train, pull down the goddamn shade, no peeking. You can't see out. No one can see in. The train is filled with fear. There aren't any young men. They're all in the U.S. Army. Some of these women have husbands who are already serving in the U.S. Army, you know. We are as American as you. We are true blue. We're faithful. You'll see. It's all right. We'll go peacefully. We'll act like we don't mind being put in prison for 2, 3, or 4 years. We will cooperate, not complain about losing everything. You can pay cents on the dollar for my farm, steal that crop, that's okay. My store, my restaurant, my house, the furniture, take it. It's okay. Of course, there's no air conditioning in trains in 1942. Does God even know where this train is going? To the mountains, to the swamplands, to the deserts, to die from heat. God bless America, my home, sweet. Home is gone. Hey, there's my dad. Dad's on this train. Dad's blood pressure is too high for the army to take him. His eyes are kind of weak. He can't shoot. But the U.S. Army grabbed his little brother Jack right at the train station. Uncle Jack is headed for Military Intelligence Service. Uncle Jack gets to take another train going another way. He ends up a 50-year U.S. Army man. It's a career with benefits. Sweet, huh? Destination, swamps of Jerome, Arkansas, where snakes come slithering out at night. It gets so hot, Dad tells me, the corn in the fields pop. Dad has not yet spied Lilio yet, his future wife, my future mom. Dad doesn't know he's going to be my dad. And he's on the same train as Mom, who doesn't know she's going to be my mom. Dad doesn't mind getting out of California. His family restaurant is too much work, and the lawyer is all set to steal it anyway. Maybe he can just sit and play cards with his buddies all day. Hey, put this guy in the kitchen, he can cook. Oh no, poor Dad. We're cooking. Only now it's for 8,500 people. But there's pay. $17 a month. Okay, anything you say, Mr. President. Dad is right on track. His great concentration camp romance with Mom. Chase that college gal, Lulio, round the barbed wire fence. You can't run very far, surrounded by swamps, huh? And snakes and guard towers. Dad'll catch her. There's Dad, along with more than 120,000 Japanese Americans. Whoosh, whoosh, off the West Coast, into the middle of America. I know. I wouldn't even be here if Dad hadn't been put in that camp in the swamps of Arkansas. Am I a lucky duck or what? So, for my entire childhood, growing up on the west side of Chicago, I was a porch sitter. I learned a lot sitting on our front porch steps as a kid, 10 stairs up, safely looking down on Winchester Street. Malcolm X Junior College now covers over the street where my parents' 3-story boarding house for men once stood. The Japanese American men who lived there were in this kind of way station while they were waiting to go into the army, released from the camps while their background checks were being worked out. The draft board was only a few blocks away from us. And at dusk, I loved sitting on the top step, looking out at the top row of green operating room lights, the top Cook County Hospital a few blocks away. The ghostly lime-colored lights on the top row of the Vanilla Milk Cook County Hospital were like glow lights beaming out to me. You'll be all right, Connie. Don't worry. Everything will be just fine. And once, one of the kids in my neighborhood came up to me. My dad says you and your dad are spies. You go to Tokyo on weekends and you report on us. I was confused. I'm 6. I don't speak Japanese. I don't know anyone there. So I went inside and I told Dad what the boy had said to me. Well, that kid's dad was our precinct captain. And in those days, on the west side of Chicago, the precinct captain came around every election and gave everyone cash money for voting straight Democrat. That's just the way things were in Chicago. In one election, my mom volunteered to work at the polling place. And that's when the precinct captain came up to our house and he shouted at our front door, "No jack rat is going to sit in this ward's polling place." Well, Dad had been an amateur boxer at school. He was already mad about what the precinct captain's son had said to me. Dad came charging out the front door and he slapped him. He fell like a thunk right at my feet. I was terrified. I thought maybe he was dead. The guy just got up eventually. He dusted off his pants and staggered off. What was kind of funny was that he was nice to us after that. That's just the way things were in Chicago on Winchester Street. They were just settled right there on the spot. My grandma, she came to America by boat, not a train. It was an immigrant journey, quite a roundabout route. Komachi was a Japanese Catholic, headed for Peru with her husband when she was stopped in her tracks by his sudden death. He was toiling in the hot sun, trying to earn money to continue his trip to Peru when he suffered a heart attack in a California apricot field. Left with 3 kids, my mother Lily, a son Key, and a baby girl Kazu, who was later born in San Francisco. Grandma never made it to Peru, and she lived the rest of her life in America. Bachan was a force of nature. Her travels took her all the way from the balmy southern island of Miyazaki, Japan, where the Jesuits had converted the people to Catholicism. She was a devout Catholic. She never failed to cross herself whenever she walked in front of a church. any church. She went from California to the concentration camp here in Arkansas to my parents' boarding house in Chicago. And finally, to her last home in Fresno, California, where she died in 1964. And during all of those travels and upheavals, she held on to this one object, this medal. It was awarded to her during the Russo-Japanese War when she was a combat nurse. Maybe it reminded her of her journey to America. Maybe it was a highlight of her young and vibrant years as a highly trained and competent combat nurse. Maybe it was a narrow escape and it reminded her of the restrictive life that she had come from. To me, it's a symbol of Komachi's wanderlust and bravery. She kept the medal close to her heart, pinned inside of her blouse, wherever she went, despite the danger of being accused of not being a loyal American by holding on to this Japanese medal. It was stored in my mother's safe deposit box. And when I cleaned it out after her death, I found it. Having it today in my possession makes me strong. Maybe someday it will be the same for my niece, Beyonce, fourth generation Japanese American, who I hope will treasure it as I have. Connie, you should do some good in the world. Make it a better place, Mom said to me when I was young and sleeping all the time. You know, your father's mother was descended from a samurai. Her blood runs in you. I have samurai blood? What does that mean? Maybe I should cultivate the samurai stuff. So I went down to this old Buddhist temple in our neighborhood where a small ragtag troop practiced the ancient art of kendo, fighting with bamboo swords called shinai and following the way of the warrior. They were all men, and we meet once a week. Sensei accepts me in the group, even though I could not even count to 10 in Japanese. I wasn't off to a very good start with these guys, but I worked hard. My mother had this mannequin on wheels, and I practiced going up and down the hallway. Hi, 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 hi. After a while, I thought I was getting pretty good. And then it happened. Our sensei told me that he was expecting a group from Waseda University to come and compete against all of the kendo groups in the United States. We would be matched against them. And in the end, the sensei would fight against the head of the Tokyo group. And of course, I wanted us to beat the sushi out of those guys. The winter passed quickly, and we started practicing every night instead of just once a week. So in the end, the teacher, the sensei, didn't pick me to compete against any of the Tokyo warriors. I was sort of disappointed, but I understood. We had to win and only put up our best fighters on the tournament day. That spring, the day of the big competition came. It was held in a big, cavernous high school gym that echoed every sound. Our Chicago group was lined up on a highly polished wood floor, 30 minutes ahead of time, waiting. And then I heard it, this kind of low rumbling. Boom, boom, boom. The rumbles grew louder, accompanied by this beast-like grunting. Suddenly, the double doors of the gym flew open, wham! And in marched a relentless army of Darth Vaders. with black helmets, heavy gloves, what looked like full body armor. These guys were clearly the masters of the universe. And no doubt about it, we were the minions. Make that the mini-minions. The slaughter ahead was certain. Our people went down, one by one by one. I was devastated. And when it came time for the two teachers to go at it, well, our sensei was shorter than the much taller, younger, kind of good-looking sensei from Tokyo. It wasn't exactly like David and Goliath, but more like Mr. Magoo meets Buzz Lightyear. So after our complete defeat, things were never the same at our home dojo. Sensei seemed a bit sadistic. He would try to get the newbie boys in a headlock and roll around on the floor, or lord it over the rest of us by picking on the newbie boys. I decided that being brave, performing good deeds, and fighting for what's right in the world doesn't have to be based on swords or an ancient code of warrior fighting. But we learned something. We had to let the bad guys know that they're So I was an advertising writer for over 20 years. I fell into the job by answering this little ad that appeared in the Chicago Tribune that I clipped out one day when I was, postgraduate and pre-starving. The article said that the American Association of Advertising Agencies, the 4As, was looking for writers of color. I don't know, color their copy or something, I guess. I don't know. At this time in the 60s, no one, including me, thought about PC, political correctness. Except I do remember one commercial on TV that always gave me this earthy feeling in the pit of my stomach. At the end of every Riceland rice commercial, this little ochre-colored cartoon guy with buck teeth and a coolie hat sing-song the company jingle. It's very nice. It's Riceland buying. A mallet came down and hit the little guy on the head. He fell down on the floor, and there were stars rolling around his head. I hated that commercial. Why did he have to be knocked unconscious? What exactly is very nice? What does that mean? Where the hell is Riceland anyway? I looked at the package one day. Oh, Arkansas. I should have known. Anyway, I called the number in the ad, which I heard over 400 colored folks called before me. Frank Doughton, who was an agency creative guy, answered and said, "Well, are you black?" No, I said, "Well, you're white." No. "Well, what are you? And why the hell do you want to get into the ad biz anyway?" I said, "The first thing that came into my head, I'm Japanese descent. I wanted to get into advertising to find out why it's very nice in Riceland." Boing. A little silence. Frank started laughing uproariously, banging his desk. I could hear him with his fist. "Okay, Connie, you're in." And 25 of us would-be writers and art directors were accepted into the 4A's training program. Upon graduation, I started out with J. Walter Thompson, a large agency in downtown Chicago. I made a lot of friends who were just like me, sort of ornery, defiant, different. We'd go to lunch every day at a nearby Chinese restaurant on Rush Street. The drinks were pretty potent there. We'd get kind of fried and stagger back to work. I remember once I was presenting a commercial to one of the businessmen, and the account executive turned to me and said, "You haven't a Chinaman's chance of getting that thing through, Connie. The whole room fell silent. Comments like that were pretty common at the agency. It was just another day at the office for me. I was the only Asian copywriter and usually the only woman in any group as well. I'd like to think that I had some influence on their attitudes towards Asians and women. So when my mom, Julio, was released from the Jerome, Arkansas camp, the FBI told her, like they told all of you, she was not to congregate or hang out in groups with people of Japanese descent. In other words, blend in. Do not call attention to yourself. Do not make waves. Fit in. She was released on a temporary permit to look for work in Chicago. She couldn't find a job. She was a college graduate from USC. She liked to recite poetry like Longfellow or Browning. She painted. She loved music and art. I guess nobody wanted a college girl, a thinker, on their assembly line. But this was bad. Without a job, she'd be sent back to the camp. And soon after, I read in her FBI file, you all sent for your files, right? I read that she married Dad at City Hall in Chicago. He'd been after her since their camp days. Was theirs a marriage of convenience? Who knows? They were good parents. I think back all these years later, how Mom would only take us to a Japanese dentist or a Japanese optometrist. Dad once said, where do you find these people? Travel with 2 kids all the way from the west side to the north side on the L, or taking 2 buses to the south side. Dr. Chikarashi, Dr. Kaira, Dr. Nobe. Is Mom afraid, they think today, that others who aren't Japanese would mistreat her children? Give us substandard medical treatment? Yeah, Mom and Dad had to watch out for my brother and me in hostile times. But we were free. We just blissfully played on the street with all of our friends. We blended in, we got along, just what the FBI had ordered. And after time went by, we had these wonderful summer picnics. But my very favorite was the Resettlers Picnic. It was a gathering of Japanese Americans who were ordered to relocate to Chicago from the various camps. Machi, Art Mountain, Manzanar, Tule Lake, Jerome, and Roar. I wasn't used to being around only Japanese American people, but these families had a bond from what they had endured together in the camps. My parents were really close to a large family, the Seto clan, who were from Wilmington, California. They had a restaurant, like Dad. Mr. Seto was a pastry chef, and he and my dad met in the Jerome kitchen. Masa was their daughter, and they were about the same age, and they worked together in the camp office. They relocated to Chicago about the same time before I was born. We spent every Christmas, Thanksgiving, and St. Patrick's Day together, and New Year's, of course. They were our Chicago family from then on. So at these picnics, there'd be long tables of dishes that we all brought. Jello molds, sushi, banana bread, chicken teriyaki, barbecue pork. There are always tons of door prizes donated by the Japanese stores around Park and Division Street. Big 100-pound bags of rice for a gift certificate, for a beauty session at the Mark Twain Beauty Shop, gifts and taburis, plenty of smaller stuff for bingo and raffle prizes. Dad's card club would set up card table and they'd play all day on a fuda, poker, bridge, leaving us kids free to do whatever we wanted. We were all together, one tribe. I loved it. I guess having the federal government forbid you to congregate maybe made these gatherings even more delicious. We were all together. And that's when I heard little tidbits, little stories about the camp. There I was, laying in the grass, one of those scratchy U.S. Army blankets left over from Jerome at the resettlers picnic. Dad and his camp buddies playing Hanafuda, grunting, wham, wham, wham. The men, pretty bad, noisy, raucous. They'd swear, call each other racial names that I'd never heard before. You Queechy, you Chinaman. Lots of sons of bitches and name calling. And as time went on, I picked up other little things. Dad would say, yeah, those feds would show up to inspect the camp and check on conditions. Going through the motions. We complained about the cold. We asked for some coal. They gave us access to go out and chop our own wood. Well, that was a big help. Son of a gun, chopping down trees in the middle of winter. Roy would say, those inspectors were worthless. Checking the kitchen so the food is fresh for one day, then back to the rotten stuff. Dad said, yeah, that's people. Built the government plenty, top dollar for spoiled milk and meat. Lucky for us, Arkansas grew rice. Mush would say, yeah, long grain, packaging rice. Guys would tune in. Yeah, it's very nice. It's rice land. Ha 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 ha. Hey, Dad would say, the only rice we eat in our house is rice land. We only buy American now, right, guys? Just shut up, bitch. Deal. Once I remember a snake slithered out of the forest preserve. And the guys caught it. They stomped it. They skinned it. They swung it around over their heads. And when they got sick of it, they threw it into the woods. Such a weird Lord of the Flies moment. Primal. Horrible. Then they just went back to playing cards. Maybe, there's no doubt, some repressed trauma that had played out that day. They felt better. Once, this Japanese American guy and I were talking about our families after camp in Chicago. And I told him where we lived. He got all huffy with me, saying, you lived on the west side of Chicago? We were only allowed on the north and the south side. How come you guys got a house? No one would even rent an apartment to us. None of us could afford a house in those days. How come you guys had one? I didn't tell him about my suspicions about Mom. And judging from the look in the guy's eye, maybe I didn't have to. When I ordered Mom's FBI file, I found out later that they had put my parents in charge of this boarding house, which housed Japanese American men after they'd come out of the concentration camp, in case neighbors got hostile to them. I think Mom was a spy, or at least an informant for the FBI. I found out later that she had a card somewhere with a number on it to call in case she noticed something suspicious. She said she never noticed anything. She never made the call. But my grandmother did get to go back to her home in California, in Fresno, and many others didn't. Young men all wanted to prove their patriotism by serving in the U.S. Army or going to boot camp. The boarders worked at nearby factories, McClurk's Catalog House, Shotwell Candy Company. Then there was a shortage of workers, right? Remember? And occasionally Mom would send me upstairs to check on the guys who slept on the floor 5 across, taking turns going to work, biding their time before going into the U.S. Army. And sometimes the men, there were only men, would borrow a dime from me, or a quarter, to take the bus downtown. See, I collected pop bottles around the neighborhood and took them back to the grocery store. I was always good for a coin. And on payday, I was sure to sit on the front porch stoop to get my money back. And then I found out some of the guys give me more back than I had loaned them. I couldn't believe it. There I was, a little pint-sized loan shark. My dad was like a crazy cross between, well, Jackie Gleason and Jimmy Hoffa. I remember the noise in our living room when Dad was alive. We had a giant, for its time, 27-inch Once TV blasting. Me banging on our old piano was missing 2 keys. The phonograph crooner belting out the donkey serenade. Dad was making pierogies in the kitchen with butter sizzling or Mexican beef stew. My dad spoke fluent Spanish that he learned in California. He had never been outside the United States. Maybe that's why Dad liked schmaltzy, old-time Mexican songs, and he had a few beers. Ay, 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 canta, no llores. And he had these 5 bubbling, gurgling, noisy tropical fish tanks that his doctor said before medicine and surgery for that problem, the doctor told him maybe it would calm him down and lower his blood pressure. But obviously that didn't work. Dad was gone in a flash at 48 years old. All of a sudden, without fanfare, he keeled over of a heart attack before work at his usual watering hole, surrounded by his union buddies. I sort of knew something was wrong because Dad drove back after leaving for work, got out, climbed the stairs, and he just patted me on the head and turned around and went back downstairs. He seemed a little down to me. Well, there was a huge funeral at Mom's church. Members of the machinist union were the pallbearers for Dad. My father was the shop steward and had taken all of his men out on strike. He told me he was probably just a C+ tool and die maker, but an A+ union guy. So after Dad died, so did all his fish. The neon tetras and the guppies, the angelfish, the Siamese spiders, the bottom-feeding catfish, all went with Dad to the great fish pond and the beyond. Mom sold all of the tanks and the paraphernalia to a guy who came and got it all. Then the whole house, the whole boarding house got quiet. The rhythm of our home was broken. I couldn't smell Dad's coffee in the kitchen anymore. My life was turned upside down. Mom believed in something she called continuity for us. We would stay in the same house. We'd have the same friends, go to the same school, have the same neighbors. So she made no plans to move back to California. She was a stay-at-home mom, but she had worked part-time at a school in Pilsen as a clerk. She used her connection there to get a teaching job, and she supported us by that job. Mom never remarried. She had one date, but that didn't work out too well. I was working downtown one day at Leo Burnett. My mother calls me up. I am not going to be buried way out in the sticks somewhere with all those other Japanese people all together. I want to be buried right in the center of Chicago, in Graceland Cemetery. Mom, I don't think they let Japanese into Graceland Cemetery. Just meet me down there, Connie. So I went down there during my lunch hour. When I got there was a guy with a clipboard writing up her order, telling her just what she wanted. My mom was no pushover. She taught 4th grade on 18th Street in Pilsen, which wasn't a great neighborhood. I saw her handle kids the way she handled my brother and me, with toughness and a bit of humor. The last words to me in the hospice will stay with me for the rest of my life. Well, honey, I had a good life. But if I had it to do all over again, she whispered in a raspy voice. I leaned over to hear her better. Yeah, Mom? Then in a louder voice, she blurts out, if I had it to do all over again, I'd have all Danish modern furniture. Well, Mom's gravesite in Chicago is no ordinary place. It's within sight of Potter and Bertha Palmer's elaborate sarcophagi in the middle of an island moat. I suppose if the FBI had to pick someone to spy for them, you'd never expect them to pick my mom, Lily O. She was a woman warrior in disguise before her time, maybe for all time. She was a soft-spoken, mild-mannered seeming woman with a degree from USC. She never missed a beat. Oh, I gotta catch that train.
This is Tony Hurst. I've known Connie since we're both babies almost. They're family friends. And her father and my father were part of a Nisei bridge group that met every Saturday for 30 years playing bridge. And so I've known her for a very, very long time. And my role today is just to ask her some questions, just to interview her in some ways. And I wanted to ask her, Connie, how did you get into storytelling?
Well, when my little brother died, I suddenly realized there was no one left who knew how he lived in the boarding house on the west side of Chicago. Now, he has two daughters who are in Torrance and Redondo Beach, California. They're not here. They're valley girls. You know, the beach is my life. And I realized that you cannot really understand yourself unless you understand what happened. And that I had some residual effects from my parents' imprisonment that were still affecting me. If somebody spoke to me in Japanese, I got kind of bristly. Why are you talking in Japanese? Or my mother used to drive with me in a car and she'd say, Connie, there's a policeman. And I'd say, so what? We're not doing anything wrong. But she was nervous about authority. And I always, like other minorities, I'm always watchful. I watch to see if there's a policeman or security guard, if they're going to stop me. So I feel that all of us here have residual effects, even if we were not born in the camps. And I want my family and the Yonsei Negoseis to understand what happened so they will understand themselves.
So how has storytelling helped you to learn more about your parents in terms of the incarceration, in terms of Jerome? How has the storytelling helped you learn all about it?
Well, in advertising, I've been a writer since I was little. I was mainly interested in poetry. It's very impersonal. And I was just at an exercise class at the North Center in Chicago, and I saw a flyer for the Goodman Theater's workshop on personal narration. And I had been trying to tell the story of growing up on the west side of Chicago for a long time. And now I had the time, and I wanted to write these stories, but I couldn't do it. They existed in a locked box in my heart. So I thought maybe this would help. So I took the course, and for about the first 5 years, I never said a word about my parents. I talked about my friends, kids on the street. And one day, I told a story where my mother was seeing me off to college and said, "Well, Connie, remember what your mother said." I said, "Mom, please, I have to go and remember. Just remember my advice. It's better to try than not to succeed at all." And everybody said to me, "That's the first time you talked about your mother." And that unlocked the box inside me. And now they can't shut me up.
Well, growing up on the west side of Chicago with very few Japanese out there, so how was this storytelling help you in terms of your identity?
Well, I think I felt for a long, I didn't care to know about the concentration camps. I wasn't really particularly interested in Japanese culture. My mother was. She would go to Minyo, and because we didn't belong to a temple or a church with other Japanese people, I was sort of resented it. I had other interests. I wanted to learn French. I wanted to learn other languages. But the more I delved in the past, the more I realized how much my parents had gone through, I started becoming more interested. So I feel really comfortable with all of you. I just met this Tom this afternoon as we were leaving, and now we're friends.
So why is your storytelling so important in terms of telling your story and passing it on to the next generation? So how does this affect you in terms of reaching out to communities like this? It's a big responsibility.
Well, I have to admit, I didn't want to come. Ross calls me and says, "How would you like?" Ross heard the story at Lifeline at a theater in Chicago, and mostly the audience is not Japanese. And I thought, well, this is fine. They could hear what had happened to us, even though they themselves were not affected. And I have to thank my director, Sharon Evans, and she's also a teaching artist at the Goodman Theater. And she said, "You have to go, Connie." And I said, "Well, okay." So here I am. And I love all of you. I really have met many of you, and I'm really happy to be here.
Well, great. I know that we're operating on a very short timetable, and we're going to end on time. So if there's any questions out there, but if there's any questions, that we could take one question maybe at the most. If not,
I can do the mic. Any questions? Come on.
Guys, we gotta ask questions. Can you tell us a little bit about your process? It's an incredible performance.
I guess I learned from the first teaching artist I worked with in Chicago that if you think of something, I wanted to write about my mother saying she'd buy all Danish. I didn't know what to do with that. I just wrote it down on a piece of paper. So I had a box full of little pieces of paper of things, and I would use it when I was writing a story. I think belonging to a workshop. In the beginning, I just wrote short stories, and we all told stories to each other. And performance, because this was a performance narration class, you had to get up and tell your story, and that also made all the difference. I was not a performer. I am not an actor, but when you're trying to get across something to someone, you have to dig deep into yourself. And then I found out that the best stories are the stories that you don't want to tell. People want to see your vulnerability and want to know what it is you really feel like inside. And those are the best stories when you dig deep and tell something that you don't want people to know. So I tell you everything I've been hiding.
Connie, thank you very much for joining us. It was great of you and sharing your process. But how long did that process take?
I started with the first workshop in 2010, and I wrote basically 10-minute stories for 5 years that were not particularly personal. They were about friends or people or something that had happened, mostly not involving any Japanese Americans. And it took a long time before I got to the place where I could tell what was really bothering me. And it happened because of the skill of the workshop teachers. The teacher said to me, well, tell us something, each of you in the class, something that hurt your feelings. 15 seconds. Right away, I had to come up with something. I said, well, I was interviewing for a job, and the man said, oh yeah, you're a terrific writer, this is great. As I see it, you have 5 strikes against you. You're short, fat, soft-spoken, Japanese woman. That happened about 40 years earlier, and it was inside me still, because it came out of me. So that's where I learned to go to that place where I'd hidden things that had hurt my feelings and get them out there. Does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you. And one other thing, just wanted to congratulate Sherry for the direction. It was really good. Thank you.
Well, you're definitely not soft-spoken. But anyway, I have a kind of unrelated question to the storytelling, but I was interested in when you first went for your first job and you were the only Asian woman in a big company, and what that was like, because I often was the only Asian woman in a big company, so I was just trying to figure out what it was like when you had to go through that.
I think because I grew up outside of the Japanese American community in Chicago, you could say I was fearless, but I was just clueless. I thought my mother raised me, my parents raised me to go anywhere I wanted to go, do what I wanted to do. And so I just followed what I wanted to do. And I never thought about, oh, they're not gonna like me, they're Japanese. And the one that was actually my first job interview, when he said, you have 5 strikes against you. And I just said, I'll get another job. And I did. I didn't care what he said to me, but I remembered it. It was still living inside me. So I want to thank all of you for listening and helping me heal.